When a young boy grieving the mysterious death of his father stumbled upon a sinister secret hidden within an abandoned warehouse, he unknowingly became the target of powerful forces desperate to silence him. Betrayed and left for dead by someone he once admired, he was thrust into a dangerous web of corruption and deceit that put his life in unimaginable danger. This is a story of bravery, resilience, and the relentless fight for justice. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe the truth should always come to light, be sure to like and subscribe for more. A chill wind swept across the modest town of Greenbridge, rustling the brittle leaves that clung desperately to the bare trees lining the streets. Dusk had set in early, painting the sky with muted shades of gray and purple. The street lamps flickered hesitantly, as though they, too, were uncertain about illuminating the quiet roads. 12-year-old Leo Morgan walked along the sidewalk, shoulders slightly hunched, a single strap of his old backpack slung across his chest. Every day for him felt heavier than the last, but he did his best to hide it. The grief he carried for his late father, Detective Jack Morgan, was a weight he had learned to shoulder in silence. It had been only a few months since Detective Morgan's untimely death, an event shrouded in mystery that left Leo's family grasping for answers. Officially, it was ruled a tragic incident in the line of duty, but the murkiness surrounding the circumstances made Leo's heart ache with unresolved questions. The boy had tried to move on, throwing himself into school and the little joys of daily life, yet every time he saw a badge or heard a siren in the distance, he was reminded of the father he lost. That evening, his pace was slow, the discomfort in his chest from missing his father felt especially acute. He usually walked home the same route each day, but something drew him off course, a fleeting curiosity or perhaps an intuitive nudge he couldn't explain. He paused at a deserted intersection, looking left and right. A tangle of old warehouses stood off in the distance, an industrial zone well past its prime. People said these buildings had been abandoned for years, inhabited only by dust, chipped paint, and the faint echoes of distant machinery. Leo often wondered what might be inside these silent structures. Despite the warnings from teachers and neighbors to stay away, citing rusted beams, broken floors, and potential hazards, he felt a sudden pull to head in that direction. It was late, and his mother, Rachel Morgan, would be worried if he didn't come home soon. Still, a strange sense of purpose turned his feet toward the looming silhouette of one of the warehouses. Darkness descended with surprising swiftness. The boy slipped through a gap in a chain-link fence that was barely held together with twisted wires. The yard was strewn with debris, crushed cardboard boxes, weather-beaten wooden pallets, and scraps of metal. He heard the distant drip of water leaking from somewhere inside, each droplet echoing like the slow tick of a clock. Leo felt his pulse intensify. He couldn't put a finger on why he had come. Maybe it was the sense of adventure that he'd been missing since his father's passing. Maybe it was a child's need to explore forbidden places and discover hidden truths. As he approached the side of the warehouse, he noticed faint lights flickering through high, grimy windows. At first, he thought it might be vagrants seeking shelter from the cold, but the glow of multiple lamps suggested something more organized. A heavy door, rusted around the edges, stood slightly ajar. Leo swallowed, recalling distant times when his father told him about the dangers of the city's underbelly. Then again, Jack Morgan had also said that sometimes, justice could only begin when someone dared to take the first step into the unknown. Summoning courage, Leo pressed his small hand against the door, pushing it open just enough to peer inside. The interior was a cavernous space with metal catwalks overhead. Old, disused machinery formed shadows that sprawled on the concrete floor like hulking beasts. Yellowish lamps, attached to portable stands, cast pools of light in key areas. In that moment, Leo's heart pounded so loudly he was sure anyone inside could hear it. He carefully slipped into the warehouse, holding his breath. At first, he saw only empty corridors and scattered crates, but as he moved deeper, he caught sight of something that made his stomach twist. A cluster of people stood in a corner, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Though they were too far for Leo to make out their faces clearly, he saw enough to know it wasn't just casual squatters huddling for warmth. Individuals who appeared disheveled and frightened were gathered in a separate area, guarded by a few intimidating figures in dark clothing. The watchers paced back and forth, occasionally shoving one of the captives and barking orders. The scene triggered an immediate sense of alarm in the boy. This wasn't an innocent gathering, it looked more like a prison. Leo's eyes darted from one face to another, but the harsh overhead light and the distance made clear identification impossible. He crouched behind a stack of broken crates, pressing his back against them, inhaling the dusty smell of rotting wood. 1,000 thoughts collided in his mind. Was he witnessing some sort of organized crime ring? Kidnapping? Something else equally dangerous? He recalled stories his father once shared about the seedy undercurrents that ran through seemingly ordinary towns. Jack Morgan had been passionate about rooting out injustices that hid behind pleasant suburban facades. Leo rummaged quietly in his pocket for his cell phone. His hands trembled so badly that he almost dropped it. The phone's dim screen illuminated his face, and he quickly lowered the brightness to avoid drawing any attention. Instinctively, he began recording video. With shaking fingers, he zoomed in, capturing the nightmarish scene of frightened individuals being herded like merchandise. He could barely believe what he was seeing. Each second that passed deepened his conviction that he needed to get proof, if only to bring it to someone who could help. Eventually, he noticed a group of well-dressed individuals enter through another door. They conferred with the guards, exchanging words in hushed tones, then handed over what looked like sealed envelopes or small packages. The entire operation exuded a sinister efficiency. Leo tried to steady his breathing, yet his heart hammered so fiercely that he worried it might betray him. He considered running, fleeing out the door and never looking back. But something in him, perhaps that spark of moral duty he had inherited from his father, told him he needed to keep recording. If he left with just a fleeting glimpse, it might not be enough to convince anyone. Panic warred with determination in his mind. He whispered under his breath, "Dad, if you can hear me, give me strength." The memory of his father's voice, calm but resolute, guided him. True justice starts with a single step toward the truth. Through the phone's small screen, he recorded a glimpse of the terror etched into the captives' faces, the ruthless men who oversaw them, and the fleeting interactions that hinted at money and power changing hands. He stayed long enough that pins and needles prickled up his legs from maintaining the same crouched position. Still, he feared that any movement might draw attention. The hushed conversations, the occasional cries from the captives, everything coalesced into a harrowing tableau of desperation. At last, Leo decided he had enough evidence to convince someone in authority. He carefully slipped away from the crates, each step a perilous balancing act between speed and stealth. The big metal door loomed in sight, and he inched toward it, exhaling shakily when he managed to slip back into the frigid night air without causing any obvious disturbance. The old yard felt like a comforting refuge compared to the horror he had just witnessed. He hurried to the fence, ducked through the gap, and started running down the dark street. Thoughts raced through his head. Who would believe him? How was he going to reveal this? As he ran, a swirl of conflict churned in his chest. He had witnessed something that could destroy powerful people's reputations and possibly save lives. And yet, with that discovery came immense danger. Exhausted and frightened, he slowed to a trot several blocks away, seeing the familiar lights of a local store. He leaned against a lamppost to catch his breath, the chill wind biting at his skin. His phone felt heavy in his pocket, like a piece of forbidden treasure. When he finally arrived home, Leo slipped inside quietly. The small living room was illuminated by a single lamp where his mother, Rachel Morgan, sat on the couch. Her eyes were rimmed with worry the moment she spotted him. She shot up, covering the distance in a few steps. "Leo," she said, "where were you? It's late, and I was about to go out looking for you." Her concern made her tone tremble slightly. Leo hesitated. He wanted to blurt out everything he had just seen, but the enormity of it tangled his words. I took a detour," he managed. "I'm sorry, Mom. I lost track of time." Rachel's expression softened. She pulled him into a hug. "You know I worry," she whispered, stroking his hair. The faint lines of tension across her forehead told him she was already under immense stress. Ever since her husband's passing, Rachel had been juggling her grief while trying to keep the household running. Money was tight, medical bills had piled up in the aftermath of Jack's final days, and the weight of single parenthood pressed down on her every moment. Leo swallowed hard, hugging her back. "I'm sorry. I won't do it again," he said, even though part of him knew he had to do something about what he had witnessed. Conflicted, he decided to wait. Maybe it was fear of endangering his mother, or maybe he just needed time to gather his courage. That night, sleep did not come easily. Lying in bed, he replayed the horrors inside that warehouse. The faces of the captive men and women haunted him. He turned over restlessly, clutching the phone that contained the video footage. Occasionally, he'd unlock it to ensure the recording was still there, as though it might vanish if he didn't check. Eventually, exhaustion claimed him, and he slipped into a restless slumber filled with fractured dreams. The following day at school, Leo found it nearly impossible to focus. Math problems blurred on the page, and history lessons drowned in the echo of his own thoughts. He was relieved when the final bell rang. He left the school building with a single-minded determination to find someone who could help. That was when he spotted Officer Travis Hale standing by the school gates, guiding traffic for departing students. Travis Hale was a familiar face around the neighborhood. He had often been a fixture at local events. He organized fundraisers, chatted amicably with parents, and was generally viewed as an approachable, helpful officer. Leo had seen him talking to his father once or twice, though he never learned the details of their conversations. In the months since Jack Morgan's death, Travis had occasionally stopped by their home to check on Rachel and Leo, always offering a reassuring smile. Leo hesitated, but then he recalled how friendly Hale had been. He reasoned that if he couldn't trust a respected community officer, who could he trust? Summoning his courage, he walked up to Hale. The man greeted him with a warm nod and a kind smile. "Hey, Leo. Everything okay?" Leo glanced around to ensure no one was listening. He lowered his voice and said, "I need to talk to you about something I saw. Something really bad." Hale's expression grew serious. "All right," he said. "Why don't we walk over there?" He gestured to a quieter corner away from the bustle of students. Once they reached a more private spot, Hale rested a hand on Leo's shoulder. "Tell me what's going on." Leo swallowed nervously. His voice shook as he recounted the events of the previous evening, how he had wandered into the warehouse, the group of captives, the suspicious exchanges of envelopes, and his hidden phone recording. Hale's eyes narrowed as Leo spoke, his face an unreadable mask. "You recorded evidence of something like that?" he asked quietly. Leo nodded and pulled out his phone. "I didn't know what else to do," he confessed. "My dad always said—" He paused, feeling tears threaten to surface. "He always said that we can't ignore injustice, no matter how small we are." Hale looked at him for a long moment. Then he managed a short, reassuring nod. "Your father was a good man," he said, his voice soft. "Let me see the recording." With trembling hands, Leo played the video. Hale leaned over, eyes fixed on the screen. The flickering footage showed silhouettes of guards, frightened individuals, and vague outlines of transactions. Despite the shaky camera and low light, it was clear that something sinister was happening in that warehouse. Hale exhaled, then looked around as if to make sure no one else was watching. "Leo," he began, voice hushed. "This is dangerous stuff. You did the right thing bringing it to me." Leo felt a wave of relief. "So you'll handle it?" he asked. "Can we show it to more officers, maybe? Or—" Hale held up a hand. "Let me handle the chain of command," he said, slipping into a firm, authoritative tone. "You should go straight home now and not talk about this with anyone else until I tell you it's safe. Do you understand?" A thread of uncertainty wormed its way into Leo's mind. There was something in Hale's demeanor, perhaps a flicker in his eyes, or the tension in his posture, that struck him as odd. Yet he reasoned that the officer was simply concerned for his safety. "Okay," he agreed in a small voice. "Please be careful, Officer Hale." The people behind this looked really dangerous. I will, Hale assured him. Now run along, and keep your phone on you at all times. If you see anything strange, call me. He offered a reassuring pat on Leo's back, and Leo took off toward home, his heart still pounding but buoyed by the hope that he'd done something right. Days passed, but Leo heard nothing from Hale. The officer didn't come to the house. He didn't call. Leo wanted to reach out, but a gnawing anxiety told him to wait. Each day that passed without any official investigation made Leo uneasy. He began scanning the local news, searching for any mention of a warehouse raid or a break in a trafficking ring. Nothing appeared. Meanwhile, he still had the video on his phone, but he was increasingly worried about showing it to anyone else without guidance. He drifted through the week, growing more nervous by the day. On Friday afternoon, he left school, glancing around for Hale, but found no sign of him. Resolving to get answers, he wandered to the police station in the older part of town. Mustering courage, he approached the front desk, feeling very small in a large marble foyer that smelled of cleaning chemicals and old paper. The receptionist, a uniformed officer with graying hair, looked at him curiously. "Can I help you, kiddo?" "I'm looking for Officer Travis Hale," Leo said, tucking his trembling hands into his pockets. I need to talk to him about something important." The officer frowned. "Hale?" he repeated. "He's not in the building. Is this an urgent matter?" "Sort of," Leo said, trying not to sound panicked. "I gave him important information and haven't heard back." "He's on leave," the officer said briskly. "Actually, now that I think of it, I saw him in here a few days ago, but I don't believe he's currently assigned to any ongoing cases. You might want to check with the front desk on Monday or call him directly. Is there someone else you can talk to about whatever you gave him?" Leo stepped back, feeling a chill coil in his stomach. "No, that's okay," he managed, then turned and hurried out before the officer could question him further. Something was clearly off. Hale had told him he would handle the situation, yet there was no hint of any official follow-up. His father's warnings about corruption in law enforcement echoed in his mind. "No," Leo whispered under his breath. "It can't be that." Still, he couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling coursing through him. That evening, Rachel Morgan noticed her son's troubled expression. She set down a dish of pasta on the dining table and studied him. "Honey," she said gently, "you've been quiet lately. Is everything all right at school?" Leo considered telling her. Part of him longed to unload the entire burden, but a bigger part was terrified of dragging her into something dangerous. Rachel was already vulnerable after losing her husband. He forced a small smile. "I'm okay," he said, trying to sound casual. "Just tired, I guess." She wasn't entirely convinced, but she let it go. After dinner, Leo retreated to his room, phone in hand. He rewatched the grainy video of the warehouse, each frame a condemnation of the cruelty he had witnessed. With a pang, he realized that the father who would have known exactly how to proceed was gone. Leo felt tears slip down his cheeks. "I miss you, Dad," he whispered to the silent room. "I wish you were here to help me figure out what to do." That Sunday, with no word from Hale, Leo decided to take matters into his own hands. He typed out a short, anonymous email to a local news reporter, summarizing the suspicious activity at the warehouse and attaching the video. His stomach churned as he hit send. He hoped the reporter would act quickly. Maybe, with the right exposure, the authorities would be forced to intervene. Then again, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just kicked a hornet's nest. It was the next evening when everything fell apart. Leo was walking home from a local convenience store after picking up milk for his mother. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, and the sidewalks were nearly deserted. Streetlights blinked awake, casting elongated shadows. He was so preoccupied with how best to push for an investigation that he didn't notice the footsteps behind him until they were almost on top of him. A figure emerged from a side street, Officer Travis Hale. His posture was rigid, his face set in an expression that was equal parts desperation and anger. Leo's heart fluttered, half relieved to see him, half alarmed by his manner. "Officer Hale!" Leo started. I was looking for you. Did you? Before Leo could finish, Hale reached out and grabbed him by the arm. The sudden force sent a shock of panic through the boy. We need to talk, Hale hissed, his voice tense. Why did you send that video to a reporter? Leo's eyes widened. How did you? Doesn't matter, Hale interrupted. You made a very dangerous move, kid. There are people who don't want this story to come out. Confusion and betrayal washed over Leo like a cold wave. I gave it to you, he said, voice shaking, because I thought you'd help. But nothing happened. I didn't know what else to do. Hale's grip tightened painfully. I told you to keep quiet, he growled under his breath. You think I don't know how to handle this? You're meddling in things you don't understand. Leo tried to pull free. Why are you hurting me? He asked, panic lacing his words. You're a police officer. For a moment, Hale's face flickered with an emotion that looked like regret. But it was quickly replaced by a hardened determination. He shoved Leo into a shadowed alcove between two buildings. The boy stumbled, dropping the carton of milk, which burst open and leaked onto the sidewalk. The air was cold, but Leo felt only the heat of fear coursing through him. Hale stood close, looming over him. I've been trying to contain this situation for months, he said in a low, urgent voice. Your father stuck his nose where it didn't belong, and now you're doing the same. That ring you found? It's bigger than you can imagine. There are people involved who have enough power to protect themselves, to make sure any squeaky wheels get silenced. And you just had to blow it wide open. Terror gripped Leo, but alongside it rose anger at the mention of his father. My dad died under suspicious circumstances, he choked out. Are you saying you had something to do with that? Hale's eyes flickered, but he gave no direct answer. Instead, he hissed, Stop asking questions you don't want answered. Then he looked around, as if debating his next move. A flicker of indecision crossed his face before he seized Leo's phone from his pocket. No! Leo yelled, reaching for it. Hale easily held it out of reach. Now I can control who sees this, he said. You have no idea of the mess you've created. Leo's world spun. Betrayal cut deep. This was the man he had trusted, the officer who had once offered him comfort. Now, that same man was staring at him with dangerous intent. Please give me my phone, he demanded, though his voice shook with more fear than strength. Hale scowled. Why couldn't you just listen? He whispered. Then, with a sudden surge of force, he pushed Leo hard. The boy's head slammed against a brick wall, and pain flared across his forehead. Senses reeling, he stumbled, seeing spots. Hale grabbed him by the collar and dragged him deeper into the alley, away from any potential witnesses. Leo barely registered what happened next. He felt sharp blows connect with his side, his leg, and his ribs. Each impact drove the air from his lungs, making him gasp and wheeze. Hale hissed under his breath. I'm sorry, kid, but I don't have a choice. You should have stayed quiet. A final blow struck the back of Leo's head. His vision went black for a moment, and he collapsed onto the cold asphalt. Dimly, through a haze of pain, he felt Hale rifling through his pockets, presumably searching for any backups of the evidence. Everything ached. The world muffled around him, and he tasted blood on his lip. He barely registered the moment when he was hoisted up and tossed somewhere. It felt as though he was thrown off a small embankment, landing in a ditch that smelled of damp leaves and mud. His consciousness flickered in and out. He was vaguely aware of footsteps trudging away, the sound of a car engine starting, and then utter silence. When Leo finally resurfaced from the haze, it was dark, maybe the middle of the night. Pain throbbed through his entire body, but most acutely in his head, ribs, and left leg. He tried to move and gasped at the sharp agony that radiated across his torso. The ditch was shallow but steep enough that it took all his effort to crawl out. Every inch he gained made him want to collapse again. Gritting his teeth, he repeated to himself, I have to get out. I have to find help. His mind spun with confusion and betrayal. Hale was part of the ring, or at least protecting it. And that meant maybe his father's death wasn't an accident at all. A cold sweat broke out on Leo's forehead, mixing with the blood that trickled down from a cut near his temple. He forced himself to concentrate on placing one hand in front of the other, then pulling himself up. Eventually, he emerged onto the side of a deserted road, panting heavily. The headlights of a passing car nearly blinded him. He waved his arms weakly, but the vehicle sped by without stopping. Leo staggered to his feet, leaning heavily on one leg. Each step felt like a battlefield. The baggy jeans he wore were torn at the knee, stained with mud, and his hoodie was ripped at the shoulder. He didn't know how long he stumbled along that lonely roadside before collapsing again. Fortunately, another car eventually pulled over, its tires crunching on gravel. A concerned voice, a pair of warm hands, they guided him to the passenger seat. The driver, a middle-aged woman with worry etched on her face, peppered him with questions, but Leo was barely coherent. She decided the hospital was the safest bet. At Greenbridge General Hospital, the lights were bright, and the antiseptic smell was overwhelming. Nurses and orderlies bustled about, hooking him up to machines, examining his bruises, stitching up the worst cuts. The local physician, Dr. Anderson, asked him in a gentle voice, "Can you tell us what happened?" Leo found words failing him. He mumbled something about an attack, about someone he thought he could trust. The staff exchanged looks of concern. They probably assumed it was a case of mugging or random violence. When they tried to call his mother, the line rang and rang. Rachel had stepped out for a late shift at her part-time cleaning job and had left her phone in her locker. Eventually, they reached the neighbor, who contacted Rachel. She arrived at the hospital in a flurry of anxiety, eyes wide and hands trembling. Upon seeing her battered son, Rachel gasped. "Leo!" She rushed to his bedside, pressing a hand over her mouth to contain a sob. "Who did this to you?" She glanced at the hospital staff, almost accusingly, as if they might have withheld answers. Leo's tongue felt like lead. He hesitated, glancing around at the presence of hospital staff who lingered, waiting. The knowledge that Hale was part of something dangerous made him wary of trusting anyone. For the moment, he offered only a shaky explanation. "I was on my way home, and I got jumped. I didn't see who it was." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and carefully stroked his hair. "My baby," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." A nurse insisted on keeping Leo overnight for observation. Rachel stayed by his side, drifting in and out of an uneasy sleep in the stiff chair. When morning came, Leo woke to the sound of hushed voices outside the curtain that enclosed his bed. He listened closely, heart pounding. One voice was his mother's. The other was a woman he didn't recognize. "We were told your late husband, Detective Jack Morgan, might have been investigating a string of disappearances," the unknown voice said. "I'm sorry to bring this up now, but—" Rachel's tone was hushed, but urgent. "Yes, he was. Jack believed it was a trafficking ring. He didn't get much support from certain colleagues, though." A bitter note crept into her voice. Leo felt a jolt go through him. This had to be related. He peeked out through a gap in the curtain. Standing beside his mother was a tall woman with short dark hair and a tidy style, wearing a neat blazer. She radiated a calm authority. On the lapel of her blazer was a small badge bearing the letters FBI, though the emblem wasn't a standard design. It looked official enough, though. Leo emerged from behind the curtain. His steps were slow, held back by bruised muscles. The tall woman turned to face him. "Leo," Rachel said softly. "This is Special Agent Elena Brooks. She wants to help us." Leo studied the agent, noticing the faint lines of worry in her eyes. Brooks offered him a sympathetic nod. "I'm sorry to meet under these circumstances," she said, addressing him gently. "I heard what happened to you last night. If you feel up to talking, I'd like to know more." He hesitated, glancing at his mother. Rachel gave a small nod of encouragement. He remembered how easily Hale had attacked him, how quickly everything had spiraled. Yet there was something in the agent's gaze that suggested genuine concern. Tentatively, Leo asked. How did you hear about me? Brooks folded her arms. We've been looking into the possibility that Detective Morgan's death wasn't an accident, she explained. Some leads suggested that your father had gotten too close to a ring of criminals involved in human trafficking. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough evidence to prove it. Recently, an anonymous email was sent to a local reporter, referencing the same warehouse your father was investigating. They forwarded that email to us, and the reporter wanted to verify the source. It didn't take long to connect it to your father's story. Leo's chest tightened. The email. Brooks must have traced it back or recognized the location. He glanced anxiously at Rachel, worried how she would react. But Rachel simply looked stunned. My husband tried to warn people, she murmured. He wrote notes, said something big was going on, but no one believed him. People said he was chasing shadows. Agent Brooks stepped closer. I know this is a painful time, but we need any information you can give us. We suspect corruption within the local law enforcement is helping the traffickers operate. Leo let out a shaky breath. I can try, he said, though he felt an uncomfortable knot of fear. They moved to a quieter corner of the hospital corridor. Nurse stations buzzed in the background, and the occasional squeak of rubber saws echoed off sterile walls. Rachel gently rested a hand on Leo's shoulder as he spoke, as if giving him the strength to speak. He told them about the abandoned warehouse, the captives he saw, the secret filming, and how he gave the footage to Officer Hale, thinking he could trust him. Then his voice caught as he recounted how Hale attacked him and destroyed his phone. Brooks's eyes darkened at the mention of Hale's name. Travis Hale? She asked, a hint of outrage in her tone. I'd heard your father mention him, but there was never any direct accusation. Are you absolutely sure it was him who assaulted you? Leo nodded, tears burning his eyes. He said I was meddling, that I made a mess by sending the video to a reporter. Leo's voice trembled. He hinted that he was involved in my dad's death. Rachel's face went white, and her breath hitched. Agent Brooks exhaled slowly, her jaw set with grim determination. This changes everything, she said. Leo, I believe you. But we need solid proof. That phone recording would have been invaluable. Leo lowered his head. It's gone, he murmured. Hale took my phone, and even if we recovered it, I'm sure he's deleted the footage by now. Brooks placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We might be able to retrieve the data if we find the phone, she said. But in the meantime, we need eyewitness testimony and any other leads. Your father left behind a few notes. Rachel, do you still have them? Rachel bit her lip. Some of his notebooks went missing after he died. But I do have a locked box of personal items I found in the back of his closet. I never had the strength to open it. Maybe there's something in there. Agent Brooks nodded. We'll need to see it. My team can help you, but you have to be careful. If Hale and his cohorts realize we're closing in, they might escalate. Leo, that means you should be protected until we figure out the next step. Leo swallowed hard. His bruises throbbed, and he felt overwhelmed by the reality of facing such a dangerous network. Yet a spark of his father's spirit seemed to burn in him, urging him onward. I'll help, he said. If it means stopping them, I'll testify, I'll do whatever it takes. Rachel squeezed his hand. We both will, she added, eyes fixed on Brooks. The agent gave them a solemn nod. Let's get you home safely. Then I'll coordinate with my team to examine everything your husband left behind. Over the next few days, Leo recovered at home. He had a cast on his left arm and bandages across his ribs. Bruises mottled his skin in an array of purple, blue, and yellow. Rachel hovered anxiously, offering soup and gentle care. Throughout it all, Leo felt a simmering blend of anger, fear, and determination. He spent hours in silent reverie, recalling how his father used to stand for what was right, even when no one else believed him. Agent Brooks returned with her small team, an analyst named Manny Rodriguez, and another agent named Kira Tan. They interviewed Leo at length, recording his every memory of that night at the warehouse and his encounter with Hale. Manny meticulously went through the anonymous email's digital trail, but found little more than a confirmatory link that the sender's IP was a local library. Leo admitted he had sent it from a public computer, hoping to remain anonymous. As Manny typed away on a laptop, Kiritan asked, "Leo, do you recall any faces you might recognize from the group at the warehouse or from seeing them around town?" Leo closed his eyes, trying to picture them. "It was pretty dark," he said apologetically. "But there was one tall man with a birthmark on his cheek. I only got a glimpse when he walked by a light." Kira nodded, taking notes. "That's helpful. We'll keep an eye out for that detail." Agent Brooks turned her attention to the locked metal box that Rachel had retrieved from the back of her closet. The box was worn, marked with small dents and scuff marks. The last remnant of Jack Morgan's personal quest for the truth. Rachel handed Brooks a small key. "I found this in one of Jack's coat pockets," she explained. Inside the box, they discovered an assortment of documents, scribbled notes, photocopies of official papers, and a small ledger listing dates, names, and cryptic references to possible coerced movements of individuals. Each page reeked of tension and worry. There were also snapshots, blurry photos of people entering and exiting various older buildings around town, including the very warehouse Leo had stumbled upon. One note read, "Th suspicious? Meeting with known suspect from Redwood Club. Must be cautious." Brooks's eyebrows rose. "He wrote the initials TH," she said, glancing at Rachel and Leo. "Travis Hale. This is pretty damning, though not conclusive. We need more. At least we have a starting point to prove your father suspected him." They laid out everything on a makeshift table in the Morgan living room. Manny scanned the documents into a digital system, cross-referencing details with known persons of interest. The entire operation felt clandestine, like a secret war being waged in the cozy confines of Leo's home. All the while, curtains were drawn, and the team spoke in low, careful voices. Leo felt his heart ache as he pored over his father's handwriting. He traced the faded ink with his finger, reading words that carried such urgency, imagining his father's frustration as he tried to blow the whistle on something so monstrous. "Dad was right," he whispered, voice wavering. "But no one believed him. Why didn't they listen?" Brooks glanced at him. "Sometimes powerful people bury the truth," she said gently. "Your father did his best, but he needed a bigger platform, a team that couldn't be intimidated." Despite these preparations and the renewed sense of purpose, the days ahead were fraught with anxiety. The FBI wanted to keep Leo's involvement quiet until they could gather more evidence. They worried that if word spread that the boy had survived and was cooperating, the traffickers would strike again. To ensure his safety, Agent Brooks arranged for discreet protection around the Morgan home, unmarked cars that parked along the street at night, agents rotating shifts. Yet Leo's mind reeled with fear. He would often wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, convinced he heard a footstep near his window. More than once, Rachel rushed into his room, finding him trembling. She tried to comfort him, though he sensed her own fears simmering beneath her gentle reassurances. She was terrified of losing her only child after already losing her husband. In the meantime, Agent Brooks and her team delved deeper into the local police structure. They discovered suspicious transactions in Hale's financial records, unexplained cash deposits, property deals under shell companies. Every new piece of evidence seemed to confirm that Hale was deeply enmeshed with the traffickers. However, the ring itself extended beyond just one warehouse. Whispers of other holding sites, other complicit officials started to emerge. Brooks confided in Rachel one evening, "This is bigger than we thought. The ring has connections to powerful local figures, business owners, city planners, possibly even a judge. We need to be meticulous in how we move forward." Rachel listened with a sinking heart. "Jack tried to warn people about how high up it went," she said quietly. "Everyone brushed him off as paranoid." Brooks looked at her sympathetically. "He wasn't paranoid. He was brave. We have a shot now at finishing what he started." Months slipped by in a tense limbo. Leo recovered gradually, though the cast on his arm remained a grim reminder of the night he was nearly killed. Despite the fear and the memories, he couldn't let go of his father's legacy. Brooks and her team visited regularly, adding to their dossier of evidence. They waited for the right moment to strike. Meanwhile, local news outlets began whispering about possible corruption in the police department, though no names were mentioned. The anonymous tip about the warehouse had become a public rumor, fueling speculation that a major crime syndicate was operating right under the town's nose. At school, Leo faced curious stares, especially from classmates who heard rumors that he had been attacked. He managed to keep a low profile, though his teachers often asked if he needed any emotional support. Leo avoided the subject, fearing any slip could endanger the ongoing investigation. Sometimes, he caught glimpses of squad cars cruising by. He'd peer anxiously at the faces behind the wheel, half expecting to see Hale's piercing gaze. But for now, Hale seemed to have vanished. That uneasy quiet was shattered one evening when Rachel answered the phone, only to hear a distorted voice breathing heavily. The call ended abruptly before she could say anything. It happened again the next night, and the night after that. Each time, the caller remained silent, listening. Rachel reported it to Brooks, who had the calls traced. They bounced through disposable devices, leaving little clue to the perpetrator. One message, however, came on the fourth call, a single, menacing phrase. "You should have stayed silent." Rachel's hand shook as she clutched the receiver. She gasped. "Brooks, it was him." Hale. Leo was in the next room, reading his father's notes, for the umpteenth time. He ran over when he heard the distress in his mother's voice. She was white-faced, tears in her eyes. "He threatened us," she managed. "He's not gone." Agent Brooks arrived within the hour, sending Manny and Kira to sweep the area. They found no sign of Hale but discovered footprints in the damp soil by the side of the house. "We suspect he's been watching from a distance," Manny informed them grimly. Leo's fears surged, but with it came a spark of defiance. "He won't scare us into giving up," he said quietly, his words trembling but resolute. "Not after what he did." Under Brooks's guidance, they decided it was time to ramp up the investigation. The FBI quietly teamed up with a few trusted local officers, men and women Jack Morgan had once respected. They began monitoring the warehouse again, gathering more conclusive proof of ongoing trafficking. Sophisticated surveillance equipment replaced Leo's stolen phone footage, capturing faces, license plates, and suspicious transactions. It wasn't long before they had enough to request an official raid. "We have documented evidence, multiple eyewitness accounts, including an updated statement from Leo, and months of intel," Brooks announced in a hushed but triumphant voice to Rachel. "We're planning a coordinated operation. It will expose the ring, rescue the captives, and hopefully corner Hale." Rachel's eyes shone with a mixture of relief and anxiety. "And you're certain it's safe for Leo?" she asked. Brooks pressed her lips together. "We'll keep him as far away from the site as possible, but we need his testimony eventually. We just have to make sure Hale doesn't vanish again." Late one night, an FBI van full of personnel in dark, discreet clothing rolled up near the warehouse. They carried protective gear and various non-lethal tools, special restraints, lights, and communication devices. Under the cloak of darkness, they set up positions around the perimeter. Brooks led the team that would breach the main entrance, while Manny positioned himself at a vantage point to coordinate communications. Kira and another agent circled the back to cut off any escape routes. After a tense wait, they received the signal that enough of the ring's key figures were inside to justify moving in. With swift precision, they forced their way into the warehouse. Startled shouts echoed from within. The traffickers, caught off guard, scrambled to hide their activities or flee. Some tried to bolt out the back, where Kira's team intercepted them. Others, pinned by the threat of imminent arrest, threw up their hands. The captives, the men, women, and a handful of children, cowered behind crates, eyes reflecting a fragile hope that this nightmare was finally ending. Brooks and her agents spent frantic minutes ensuring the safety of the victims, helping them out of the holding area, confirming no one was harmed in the case. The operation moved rapidly, but one glaring absence soon became evident: Travis Hale was nowhere to be found. A search of the premises revealed a small office in the corner, filled with papers and a handful of ledgers reminiscent of Jack Morgan's notes, but there was no sign of the corrupt officer. Brooks's expression was grim. She spoke into her radio. "He's not here. We may have a runner. Place an APB, correction, a nationwide alert. He's too dangerous to let slip away." Agents combed every nook and cranny, but all they found were more terrified individuals locked in hidden rooms. Freed from their captors, they huddled together, trying to process their sudden liberation. Simultaneously, local ambulance teams and social workers arrived, providing care to the rescued, offering blankets, medical checkups, and safe transport to secure locations. The warehouse, now flooded with bright portable lights, resembled a rescue center more than the silent chamber of horrors it had been. Yet the victory was incomplete without the arrest of Travis Hale. Back at the Morgan home, Leo paced anxiously, having been strictly told to remain behind. Rachel tried to keep him calm, but her own nerves were raw. The phone rang, jarring them both. When Leo picked it up, Manny's voice crackled over the line. "We got them, kid. The ring is broken wide open. But Hale wasn't here. He slipped away." Leo felt his stomach lurch, disappointment and dread washing over him. "So he's still out there," he said in a subdued tone. He recalled the night of the attack, Hale's cold words echoing in his memory. "Be careful," Manny added. "He might reach out again." Rachel's heart pounded. She realized that Hale, cornered, might be desperate enough to try something drastic. "We need to stay vigilant," she told Leo. "Agent Brooks will protect us." Hours later, Brooks arrived with an update. "We found evidence that Hale was alerted to our plan," she explained. "He has connections to some of the influential people we just arrested. We suspect a tip was relayed. He's gone underground." Leo clenched his fists. "He can't hide forever," he said, though inside he quaked at the thought of a vengeful, unpredictable man who knew exactly where they lived. For a week, tensions remained high. The successful raid flooded the local news, which broadcast details about the massive trafficking operation, the heroic rescue of captives, and the outstanding arrest warrants for those who had fled the scene. The public learned that multiple individuals in positions of authority were complicit, though names were withheld until further investigation. Meanwhile, rumors persisted that an officer gone rogue was on the run, though official statements were cagey. Leo tried to go back to school, but the climate there had changed. Kids whispered about the dramatic warehouse raid and the criminal cops. Some asked if Leo knew anything, given that his dad had been an officer. He denied any involvement, but a few of his classmates gave him admiring glances, suspecting he might be a behind-the-scenes hero. He felt torn between pride and fear. Agent Brooks kept in close contact, updating the Morgans on new arrests and confessions. Several ring members had begun cooperating, revealing details about how the organization was structured. "We're closing the net around the major players," she told them during one late-night phone call. "We just need that final piece of the puzzle, Hale. If we get him, we can expose everyone involved." But as more of the traffickers were taken into custody, Hale remained elusive. Another week passed in a tense standstill. Then, early on a quiet Saturday morning, Brooks burst into the Morgan home, a jolt of urgency in her step. "We've located him," she announced. "One of our detainees spilled that Hale has holed up in a remote cabin in the hills, near Lake Greenwood. He's got a hostage, a young girl from the ring who went missing the night of the raid." Leo's stomach twisted. He recalled the fear he had seen on the captives' faces in the warehouse. The thought of one of them still in Hale's clutches sent a shiver down his spine. Rachel glanced at Brooks, her voice trembling. "You're going after him?" Brooks nodded, grim but resolved. "We have to. This has to end." She asked Rachel to keep Leo at home again, insisting it would be too dangerous for him to even be near the scene. Leo felt a surge of frustration. "But I can help," he protested. "I can identify him, maybe." Rachel placed a hand on his shoulder. "No," she said gently but firmly. "You've already done so much. You're still hurt. Let the professionals handle this. Leo bit his lip, nodding reluctantly. He realized it wasn't about being a hero. It was about survival. His father's memory would guide them, but physically putting himself in harm's way again wouldn't help anyone. The cabin was nestled in a dense cluster of evergreens that surrounded the shimmering waters of Lake Greenwood. Agent Brooks led a team of half a dozen operatives along a dirt track. The air was crisp, with a hush that fell over the group as they advanced quietly, mindful of the hostages' safety. They were outfitted with protective gear but carried no visible firearms, an intentional choice, as the Bureau aimed for a safe negotiation if possible. Tension bristled in the atmosphere. Through binoculars, Manny spotted movement near the cabin's single window. A figure flitted across the glass. "We have eyes on one adult male, one child," Manny reported softly. "He's pacing. The child is sitting in a corner." Brooks steadied herself, remembering how Leo had described Hale's capacity for brutality. She crept closer, adjusting a small device that allowed her to pick up sounds through the cabin's walls. Hale's voice came through, muffled but distinct. "We're leaving as soon as I figure a safe route. You just stay quiet, or things get bad." Then a series of heavy footsteps. Brooks indicated for the team to fan out, creating a partial perimeter around the cabin. She pressed a communication device at her collar. "Travis Hale," she announced, her voice carrying through a small amplifier placed at a safe distance. "This is Special Agent Elena Brooks. We know you have a hostage. We only want to ensure her safety. Let's talk." Silence followed, then Hale's voice boomed from inside the cabin. "Stay away!" he shouted. "I have no intention of going quietly. You come in here, and I can't guarantee what happens." Brooks exchanged a look with Manny, who set down his equipment. She tried again. "We can discuss the conditions of your surrender. But first, let the girl go. She has nothing to do with your grievances. If you cooperate, we can." He cut her off with a derisive laugh. "There's no cooperation left for me. All you Fed agents think you can lock me up and that'll be the end. It won't fix anything. This entire system is rotten, top to bottom." He stomped around, rattling the floorboards. "That kid, Jack Morgan's boy, he's the one who stuck his nose in all this. That's who you should blame for why it came to this." Brooks felt a flash of anger on Leo's behalf. She forced a calm tone. "Leo did what was right. Nothing about your arrangement was justified. This is your chance to prove you're not beyond redemption. Release the girl and surrender peacefully." A tense hush followed, broken by the young girl's faint sobbing from inside. The heart-wrenching sound spurred Brooks and her team into swift action. She gestured to Manny, who moved toward the side of the cabin where a small window stood half-covered by a ragged curtain. Another agent, Kira, crept to the back, searching for alternative entrances. They intended a simultaneous approach, distract Hale with negotiation while quietly positioning themselves for a quick rescue if the chance arose. Inside, Hale's voice carried once more. "This is your last warning. Back off, or I'll do something you can't undo." Brooks glanced at Manny and nodded. She raised her voice again. "Travis, we don't want anyone getting hurt. This isn't a bluff. We have a full team here, and we've surrounded the area. There's nowhere to run." Silence, broken only by the rustle of branches in the wind. Then, without warning, the cabin door burst open. Hale appeared on the threshold, gripping the hostage by the arm. He kept a small blade pressed to her side, no firearms, but the threat was no less dire. The girl appeared to be about 10 years old, tears streaking her cheeks. She looked petrified, her eyes darting to the group of agents in silent plea. Hale's face was drawn and wild, desperation etched into every line. "One step closer and he warned, pressing the blade slightly closer to the child. Brooks held up both hands in a placating gesture. "No one is moving," she said, carefully stepping forward an inch. She had no weapons drawn, just open palms. "Don't do anything to her. She's innocent." He glowered, scanning the agents. "I want a vehicle," he snarled. "Unmarked. I'll release the girl once I'm on the road." Brooks shook her head slowly. "We can't let you go," she said, voice laced with calm authority. "Think about it, Travis. No matter where you run, we'll find you. The best outcome for you right now is to spare that girl. And maybe, just maybe, the court will remember you showed some remorse." He barked a grim laugh. "You think I care what a court thinks?" The blade wavered dangerously close to the girl's arm. She whimpered, tears streaking across her terrified face. "I've seen how this system treats men who know too much." Brooks's voice took on a pleading note. "Travis, it doesn't have to end in tragedy. Let her go." Manny and Kira crouched behind the cabin, waiting for a clear angle. If they charged while Hale had the hostage, the outcome could be disastrous. Another agent whispered through the earpiece. "We're in position for a non-lethal approach if he steps forward 2 more paces." Brooks felt her pulse pounding. She had to keep him talking. "This girl has her whole life ahead of her," she said. "She's not responsible for anything that's happened to you. If you hurt her, you only prove that you've lost all honor. Don't do it." Hale's face twisted, torn between mania and a flicker of conscience. The tension in the air was so thick it was suffocating. Time seemed to slow as he stared into the frightened eyes of his hostage, then glared at Brooks. At last, with a guttural snarl, he shoved the girl toward Brooks. The child stumbled, collapsing into Brooks's arms, sobbing in relief. It was the opening Manny and Kira needed. They dashed in from opposite sides, using specialized, non-lethal takedown devices, launching a net-like contraption that ensnared Hale before he could flee. He thrashed, cursing, as the agents subdued him. The blade clattered to the ground. Within seconds, Hale was on his stomach, arms pinned behind his back, rage burning in his eyes. He let out a furious yell that echoed through the pine trees. Brooks cradled the girl, who clung to her neck. "It's okay, you're safe," she murmured, leading the child away from the chaotic scene. The other agents secured Hale, ignoring his spat curses and threats. Manny quickly searched him, retrieving a cell phone and some paperwork that might prove critical and linking him to the broader conspiracy. Trembling with adrenaline, Brooks stepped back, exhaling a shaky breath of relief. She gazed at Hale, now subdued, shouting bitterly at the agents. "You'll regret this! You're all pawns in a broken system!" he roared. Brooks steeled herself. "Take him into custody," she ordered. "We'll see how much he regrets it when he faces the full weight of justice." News of Hale's capture reverberated throughout Greenbridge. After so many months of speculation, worry, and whispered rumors, the man who had betrayed his badge and orchestrated unimaginable harm was finally in custody. The ring that had preyed on the vulnerable was effectively dismantled. Many of its leaders had been arrested, its victims were receiving care, and the community's illusions about the sanctity of its local institutions were irrevocably shattered. When Agent Brooks called the Morgans to share the news, Rachel covered her mouth, tears pooling in her eyes. "They have him," she whispered to Leo. "He's not getting away." Leo felt a massive weight lift off his shoulders, though the relief came mixed with an ache he couldn't fully shake. A swirl of conflicting emotions churned in him: anger at Hale, sorrow for his father, gratitude for his mother and Brooks, and a deep, burning wish that Jack Morgan could see the justice unfolding. In the days leading to Hale's trial, the FBI worked tirelessly to compile the mountain of evidence. Hale initially refused to speak, adopting a sneering silence in interrogation rooms. However, confronted with the overwhelming proof, bank records, witness statements, the net of corruption that spanned multiple agencies, he eventually began to talk. He named other accomplices in hopes of a lighter sentence. His revelations sparked additional arrests, including some high-profile local officials. The entire city shuddered as the depth of the conspiracy came to light. Leo and Rachel were called to testify, their testimonies crucial in establishing the chain of events that exposed the ring. For Leo, the idea of walking into a courtroom, facing the man who nearly killed him, was terrifying. But he knew it was necessary, both for the sake of the victims and for his father's memory. As the trial approached, special protection was arranged for them, ensuring no rogue associates could retaliate. The courtroom brimmed with tension on the day Leo took the stand. Rows of spectators, journalists, and law enforcement officers crowded the seats. Hale sat at the defense table, his face a mask of cold defiance, wrists bound. Occasionally, he would glare at Leo, but the boy fixed his gaze on the prosecutor instead. The judge's gavel sounded, calling for order, and the air felt almost electric with anticipation. Leo's voice quavered initially as he recounted how he stumbled onto the trafficking operation in the abandoned warehouse. His eyes flickered to the jury, who watched him with a mixture of shock and sympathy. He explained how he recorded the video on his phone and trusted Officer Hale with it, only to be betrayed and attacked. Tears threatened to spill when he described lying in that ditch, bruised and broken, thinking he might never see his mother again. Then, summoning courage from the memory of his father, he continued, detailing everything that led to the FBI raid and ultimately Hale's capture. Every word Leo spoke formed another link in the chain of evidence. Prosecutors highlighted that Hale's assault on a minor and theft of evidence underscored his willingness to protect the trafficking network at all costs. The defense tried to suggest that Leo's recollection might be influenced by injuries and fear, but the boy stood firm, supported by the physical evidence of his injuries, subsequent medical records, and corroborating statements from Agent Brooks and Rachel. When Rachel took the stand, she spoke of her husband's dedication to truth, the secret notes he left behind, and the tension he had faced with certain colleagues. She described her horror at losing him and her renewed anguish upon learning that those he trusted might have orchestrated his death. Her words brought members of the jury to tears, especially when she recalled Jack Morgan's unwavering moral compass and the heartbreak that his demise had caused their family. Then, the prosecution unveiled a trove of digital communications retrieved from Hale's phone, cross-referenced with bank records that tied him to the trafficking ring. The final nail came when some of the rescued victims testified, describing how Hale had visited the warehouse to intimidate them into silence. Their emotional accounts left no doubt about the officer's role in the syndicate. After weeks of intense testimony and arguments, the court reconvened for the verdict. Silence hung like a heavy curtain when the foreperson rose to speak. One by one, the charges were read: conspiracy to commit human trafficking, kidnapping, aggravated assault, corruption of a minor. Guilty on all counts. The last blow fell when the judge sentenced Hale to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Hale stood impassive, but color drained from his face as the reality of the sentence set in. For Leo, the moment felt surreal. A tide of emotion crashed over him: relief, sorrow, a release of the tension that had pinned his life in fear for so long. Rachel pulled him into an embrace, tears coursing down her cheeks. Agent Brooks, standing nearby, nodded with quiet satisfaction. Justice was served, though it came at a painful price. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, and microphones jostled for space. Leo tried to avoid the spotlight, but a few reporters gently called out his name. He didn't want fame. He only wanted closure. As he and Rachel walked away, they felt the crisp autumn air sting their faces, air that smelled of new beginnings. In the days and weeks that followed, Greenbridge slowly tried to pick up the pieces. The infiltration of the police force had led to a thorough internal review, resulting in the suspension or dismissal of several officers who had either turned a blind eye or been complicit in wrongdoing. New leadership stepped in, pledging to rebuild public trust. The city's mayor, once suspected of pocketing money from the ring, was replaced by a reform candidate who promised greater accountability. Rachel Morgan found a quiet solace in knowing that her husband's name was cleared. No longer would people whisper that Jack Morgan's fatal obsession had been a fool's errand. He had been right all along. There was something rotten at the core of Greenbridge, and his relentless pursuit of the truth had likely cost him his life. She attended a small dedication ceremony at the newly restructured police station, where a plaque was placed in honor of Detective Jack Morgan's bravery. There, she and Leo stood together, tears in their eyes, as the new police chief offered a public apology for the department's failure to protect one of its most honorable men. Leo, for his part, underwent counseling to cope with the trauma he had endured. The nightmares of Hale's attack still haunted his sleep, but each morning he woke with a determination to move forward. He returned to school with renewed resolve, focusing on catching up on missed assignments, forging deeper bonds with friends who offered unwavering support. Though some nights he still lay awake, heart pounding at small noises, each day he grew stronger in the knowledge that he had done his part to end a great evil. Agent Brooks continued to check in on the Morgans, forging a friendship that went beyond the confines of a case file. She dropped by for a cup of tea, or to ask how Leo's therapy sessions were going, or just to share a quiet memory of Jack. Though her job often took her to other parts of the country, she made it a point to keep the Morgan family updated on any lingering fragments of the case. More arrests were made in far-flung places as the ring's tentacles were discovered nationwide. Each takedown felt like another step toward closure. For the victims rescued from the warehouse, community organizations, churches, and charities banded together to provide resources, housing, counseling, job training. Stories of their resilience circulated, reminding everyone that while tragedy can strike, courage and compassion can pave the way for healing. Leo saw a news piece featuring a former captive, newly employed at a local business, smiling for the first time in years. He felt his heart fill with empathy and pride, knowing that the evidence he risked his life to gather played a part in freeing people like her. Months turned into a year. On the first anniversary of the warehouse raid, Rachel and Leo visited the lake where Hale was finally captured, placing flowers by the water in memory of all those who had suffered. The crisp air carried the sound of birds singing, a sharp contrast to the tension of that fateful day. They stayed for a while, reflecting on the complicated chain of events, the heartbreak, the danger, the revelations, and the triumph of seeing justice served. Leo stood by the water's edge, the breeze ruffling his hair. He felt older than his 13 years. The reflection on the lake's surface showed a boy with determined eyes, still bearing faint physical scars. Yet beneath that reflection lay a spirit that had been tempered by adversity, a resolve shaped by the memory of his father's unwavering devotion to the truth. He turned to his mother, who gave him a gentle smile. "Dad would be proud," he said quietly, blinking back tears. Rachel nodded, her voice catching. "He'd be proud of both of us." She slipped an arm around her son's shoulders, pulling him close. "It's time to keep living, Leo. We did what we had to do, and now we can start to heal." They returned home that afternoon, the sun dipping behind the rooftops in a blaze of oranges and pinks. Light streamed through the living room window, illuminating the modest furniture, the quiet decorations, and the framed photo of Detective Jack Morgan in uniform. Leo paused in front of the photo, feeling a wave of gratitude. "We made it, Dad," he whispered. "We made sure your fight wasn't in vain." Life in Greenbridge found a measure of balance in the months that followed. The humiliating scandal and local law enforcement gradually evolved into an era of reform. New officers underwent rigorous ethical training, and citizen watchdog groups ensured transparency. While the memory of betrayal would never vanish entirely, the city strove to become an example of how a community could rise above corruption. Rachel eventually decided to go back to school, pursuing a degree in social work. She felt driven to help families torn apart by tragedy, inspired by her own struggles as a widowed mother and the heartbreaking stories she had witnessed. Leo, too, found ways to channel his experiences. He joined the debate club, focusing on topics like ethics and accountability. His voice had a weight to it that belied his years. When he spoke about justice, people listened. Agent Brooks continued her life of constant motion, tackling cases across the region. But she remained in touch with the Morgans, even suggesting that Leo might consider an internship with the Bureau when he was older. The boy smiled at the idea, uncertain if that was his path, but grateful for the confidence she placed in him. Despite their progress, healing wasn't linear. There were days when old fears resurfaced. Sometimes, a distant siren or a shadow in the street made Leo's heart lurch. Rachel would have moments of quiet grief, tears welling up unbidden at the memory of Jack's face. Yet these moments became less consuming, balanced by the knowledge that they had found answers, that they had fought back. They carried their scars, but the scars no longer defined them. They were marks of survival, of a battle won against a terrible injustice. Most importantly, the truth about Detective Jack Morgan's death was finally acknowledged. he had died because he refused to turn a blind eye. His file at the precinct was updated posthumously with commendations he never lived to receive. A new scholarship fund was established in his name, dedicated to training ethical law enforcement recruits. At the ceremony, Rachel and Leo stood side by side, beaming with pride tinged by sadness. The crowd gave them a standing ovation, acknowledging the ultimate sacrifice made by a man who believed in justice so much that he gave his life for it. As time rolled onward, each small milestone, like Leo's birthday, Rachel's academic achievements, or a quiet evening meal without fear, felt like another piece of normalcy regained. They laughed together, recalling funny anecdotes about Jack's sense of humor or the times he'd dance in the living room to cheer them up. Those memories brought comfort rather than pain, as if he was still there, guiding them toward a future filled with hope. Late one summer evening, as a warm breeze drifted through the open windows, Rachel and Leo sat on the couch, watching a documentary about grassroots justice movements. The phone rang, and Rachel got up to answer. It was a reporter requesting a statement about how the family felt now that a full year had passed since Hale's sentencing. Rachel covered the receiver and glanced at Leo. "Do you want to talk to them?" she asked softly. Leo thought for a moment. He recalled the nightmares, the near-death experience, and the wave of relief that came when the man responsible was put away for life. He also thought about the deeper reasons he and his father had fought, not for vengeance, but to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Looking at his mother, he nodded. He took the receiver. "We're thankful," he began, voice steady. "Thankful that justice was done and that those who were hurt are finally getting help. My dad's legacy was about doing the right thing, even if it's difficult. We just hope that people remember this story and never stay silent when they see wrongs in the world." When he hung up, Rachel gave him a gentle smile. Outside, the last traces of sunset glowed on the horizon, signaling that night would soon blanket the town. But inside the Morgan home, there was light, both in the lamps they'd switched on and in their hearts, where hope and peace had begun to blossom once more. They stayed up that night, talking about the future, sharing a midnight snack of leftover pizza, and exchanging silly jokes that only the two of them found funny. Eventually, Rachel pressed a tender kiss to Leo's forehead, telling him how proud she was. In the glow of the floor lamp, Detective Jack Morgan's framed photo seemed to reflect a soft contentment, as though he, too, was part of that serene moment. No one could undo the losses or the scars, but they had faced the darkness, fought for the truth, and come out stronger. That was the real inheritance Jack Morgan left behind, a spirit of resilience, a belief that justice was worth every risk, and a lesson that love could overcome even the deepest betrayals. Leo closed his eyes that night with a certain quiet certainty. Whatever life brought next, he and his mother would stand together, guided by Jack's example and protected by the strength they had found in each other. And somewhere, in a place beyond grief, Detective Morgan was surely watching over them, proud of how they had carried on his relentless fight for justice. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.